Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. All right, so it's 2:10, so let's get going. 10 is a bit more sparse. Is there a midterm or anything today, or just is a quiz today? Okay, so I'll see if I can give you guys tips that help a bunch. How many people, how is milestone 1 going? How many people have started on milestone 1? Okay, a few. So I'll give you one tip. Make sure you read the header file. Okay, so as the milestone 1 handout says, if we put a corner case in the header file, so we tell you what to do if the following maybe slightly unusual case occurs, we are going to test it, and we may not test it in the public test cases. So make sure you read the header file. If it says there's a corner case, make sure you handle it. Okay, so any questions about milestone 1? Because we're going to move on to basically how to work effectively in a team today. Okay, so let's go on to that then. So I think you saw this in APS 111, 112. So you're forming a team and you're getting going on a project. And Tuckman had a model of the 4 stages of creation, well, 4 stages that a team typically goes through. And let me show you what those are. They rhyme, so they're easy to remember. Forming, okay, so you're picking your team, you're getting to know each other. Storming, so you don't quite know how to work together, figuring out who does what. It can be a certain amount of confusion, it can be conflict sometimes. Norming, so you're getting used to working with each other, you're figuring out what are the typical rules, how do you work effectively, what are the norms of the group, how do you just execute. And then the last stage is performing, and not all teams to get to this. Performing is, you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. You've got norms and you follow those procedures. You're actually looking for how can we make things better. So you kind of brainstorm, hey, is this the best way to do it? Maybe we could change how our status meetings work. Maybe we could change our coding style. And you're constantly looking for improvement. Those performing teams have open discussion, so they look for areas where they can improve, they talk about it, and they're high trust. So high trust makes you much more efficient. You can just say what you're thinking and count on your teammates to take it in the spirit it's intended. Not all teams have that. Okay, so you're right here, for most of you. You've just formed your team, don't exactly know who does what. Your goal is to get at least to here, like relatively quickly, because you only got a semester-long project. One of the reasons I'm showing you this is that it's comforting to know that some amount of conflict and confusion is just normal, right? That happens when you form a new team. And I didn't see this in APS 111, 112. I saw this in actually a particular management training session when I was at Altera. So when you're a manager or director at a company, if that company cares about its people, they focus some on training. So we had a couple times a year, we'd have like trainers come in from outside institutions and train sometimes managers, sometimes people at director level and above. And remember, one of those 2-day sessions, we talked about how to make effective teams, and this was one of the things that was shown. I found it comforting because I formed many different teams over my career, and it was useful to know that this phase of like confusion, potentially a certain amount of conflict, is normal. So don't worry if you're going through that. You want to get here though, right? Where everybody understands their role, you're working away. And some of you will hopefully get to performing. In industry, this is what they're trying to get teams to, and they don't all make it here. So if a team in industry doesn't make it to at least norming after some amount of time, might take months, it's a problem, right? There's probably going to be a change in that team, change in the management of that team, because it's not able to work very effectively, and some teams, that's as far as they get. The highest performing teams in the best companies are performing, meaning that they're always looking for how can they do things better, right? They don't just come in, do the job the same way they did it yesterday. And there's a social aspect to that. You actually have to trust your team members to say, hey, I think we could do this better, and have that brainstorming session. How many people remember this from APS 111, 112? You seen this before? Okay, so at least a few people have seen it, at least a few people remember it. Okay. So how do we get to norming and performing faster? Any ideas? Okay, so it's fine to say you should try to work together effectively, and there's a social component of that that's very important. What do? You just formed a team. What should you do now to get your team to this higher level of performance? So buzz in if you got a thought. Okay, so A09, I see you got an idea. What do you think you should do?
It's important to establish deadlines and meeting requirements and.
Yeah, okay, so establish deadlines. So you're establishing some norms. How are we going to meet deadlines, etc.? So I agree. You start trying to work on group norms. How are you going to work together? So good idea. Anything else? Anything else you should do? Something's pretty basic. Any other thoughts? No other ideas? Teams that you've been in where it was fun, worked well? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of my thoughts. Well, actually, I'm going to pick on Professor Chong. Professor Chong, what do you think you should do?
Get to know each other better outside.
Okay, so I'm going to turn on your microphone, because otherwise it might be hard for you. What do you think?
Spend some time getting to know each other outside of just your academic environment.
Yeah, this is a really key idea. You need. People trust each other when they can see each other, when they know each other. They don't trust each other just because we've all agreed we should have milestones, right? That is a good thing to do, but we need to build that trust. So meet, work together. So work in the lab, you can go out for lunch together. These are great things to do. When I was so before I was at Altera, I had my own startup, okay? And our startup we had multiple companies we're working with. We're trying to build new CAD systems for them, build new computer chip architectures. So one of those customers was Altera. On one particular project with Altera, we are trying to replace a part of their CAD system, a bunch of the algorithms in it, with ones that would work better. And we'd already done this on one previous generation. It went well, so they believed in us. They took a team within Altera whose previous job was to make better algorithms, and they said, you now will work with this outside team, and you will essentially be their support team. You will build APIs they can talk to. So we're going to depend on this team, and there might be a certain amount of resentment that basically what they used to do, which they probably considered pretty interesting and challenging, is now given to us as an outside company, and they're told to do what we need. So we met with them in person in California to get to know each other, and we bought them a really nice dinner. We took them out to dinner, we hung out with them for hours, because we want to have a relationship with them. Our success is going to depend on their support of us, and we might actually be starting with a certain amount of resentment. So we got to get past that. You guys aren't starting with resentment, so that's good. So yeah, but you're starting with maybe not much knowledge of each other. Get to know each other. So the best is actually physically get together. The second best is you can plan and code together in Zoom, so even online meetings are better than no meetings. The worst is actually just go off and say, we'll each do our own thing. And you might think, well, that's the most productive, I don't have to waste time talking to them. You're not building that trust, and that trust is really important to having a high-performance team. I can give you many examples like this over my career, where teams were not getting together enough, and they didn't trust each other, and it was causing all sorts of breakdowns. Okay, this is just the way humans work. They trust people they can see, talk to, more than people they can just email, so you got to get together in person. Okay, so this is an interesting story from the New York Times. I don't know if you'll be able to get past the paywall. If people want to see this and you can't get past the paywall, let me know, and I'll see if I can post a PDF. Professor Chong alluded to this study earlier in the course. Google's a very data-driven company. They like to study everything. They like to quantify everything. So they studied their teams. Which of their teams were rated as higher performing by others? And then what did those teams do? And they found they did all sorts of different things. They thought there might be like some commonality of maybe they have the most senior technical people, maybe they're smaller, who knows? They didn't find any of that, right? They were actually quite diverse in how the teams were set up. But they did find a couple of things that were pretty common, like uniform across these high-performing teams. One was equal speaking. If they just watched their status meetings, the members of the team tended to all speak around the same amount. So what this means is they all were engaged. Nobody's just checking out, not saying anything. Nobody was dominating the conversation. It was a sign they were engaged and they felt valued. And that had a high trust environment. They could say things. They also found that on average there was a high social sensitivity. People could read each other's emotions. This is probably part of why did they all talk. If someone kind of was hanging back, maybe was feeling left out, people would try to pull that person into the conversation. So trying to get the most out of everybody. What do you guys think of this? Does this make sense to you? Anybody, I might have to call Professor Chong again and then give him a whole bunch of chocolate bars after class. I mean, this does make sense to me. Does everybody think, is this enough? Is that all there is to it? To have a high-performance team, just make sure you pay attention to people's emotions and you all talk around the same time, same amount. So, you know, these are lessons you could have learned very early in your life. Is this all there is? Anybody want to weigh in? Is there anything else you think? In this article, it actually says these are kind of the key things Google found. So we're going to call on Professor Chong again. So Professor Chong, what do you think? Is there anything else that you think needs to come in here, or any thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't know exactly what you're getting at, but I do think that there is a whole field of research into team behavior, and then there's also a set of tools that you can use to make your operation in teams more efficient and better, and I think we can explore those as well.
Okay. So yeah, there is more to it. These are good things to understand, but something that's not in the article that is implicit in Google. So most of you, probably none of you have ever worked at Google, right? And you may know people there, you might not. Google's a very high-performance company. They don't just evaluate, you know, what are our good teams and bad teams. They evaluate their employees every year. That's pretty common. That evaluation is quite rigorous. It's not just the manager. They get feedback from all the peers. What that does is it produces a very high-performance, accountable culture. They tend to select people who have high expectations of themselves and of the teams, and their whole system reinforces that. Right? They're getting feedback from everybody about how are you doing. That's also really important in my experience for high performance teams. You want a high trust environment where people can talk. It can't though just be a social club, or a social club where everybody gets along great, we all have potato chips, we all say we're fantastic, we have beers, and the work never gets done. That doesn't happen at Google, because baked into the company are these high performance expectations. So in my opinion, this is another aspect of high performing teams. The team members want to do well. They want continuous improvement, they want to excel. If you mix that with a high degree of trust, then you're in a great place. Okay, so what makes an effective team? So I'm going to give you homework for a couple minutes. I want you to think about what makes a team effective in your opinion, and then we'll take it up. Okay, so let's start a timer here. Maybe I'll pause the timer for a second. So this is a really important thing. So in my career, probably the most important thing that I could do as I moved up through management was to be able to build effective teams. So this isn't just for this course. This is really, really important for your career. Engineering is a team sport. How do you make those teams work well? Okay, so why don't you talk about that for a couple minutes? Okay, so anybody want to buzz in with their top items for teams? What makes an effective team? What are you going to try to do, right? Obviously, we're hoping these are actionable for you. Okay, so F09, let me make sure your volume is on. Yes, F09, where are you?
Hello.
Yes, what do you think?
So our first one was communication and transparency. Being always able to talk to your team about what's going on. Say you slacked off or there's something going on. Being able to lean on your team members and making sure that they're aware that you may need some help is very important.
Okay, so your first one is communication and transparency. Totally agree. Your second one is being able to lean on your team members. Is that right?
That was kind of within the transparency.
Okay, so that's within that first one. Okay. So I guess lean on your team members is also like kind of trust.
Yeah.
You're trying to get to a high trust environment.
Definitely. And I guess that kind of goes with respect. Making sure everyone respects each other. No idea is superior than the other. Everyone gets to be heard and everyone gets to share their ideas.
Okay.
And then the last one would be motivation. Everyone has a drive to do good work on the team, and everyone is motivated to do well and work well with each other, I guess.
So I guess shared objective or shared motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, great ideas. This one I want to come, so I totally agree. Communication and transparency, absolutely one of my top items. Trust, you want to trust people, it makes everything easier. You can tell hard truths when you trust each other. You don't start out trusting each other. So this is where things like respect, so people know you respect them, you show that helps build that trust. This one, a shared objective and motivation, perfect sense, right? Everybody knows the direction you're going to, clarity of objective, where are we? This one I'm going to come back to. So this one is interesting. No idea superior to each other. What do you mean by that?
That was more like no one's better than each other, you know. Maybe like less about, maybe I shouldn't have used the word idea, but more like.
We were thinking more about what you said about like the efficiency meetings, in which you could tell efficiency by how much, what percentage of time was shared, like
right.
how much everyone talked, like instead of like one person talking and taking over the whole meeting, like having everyone's ideas being heard in that sense.
Makes sense. So everyone feels heard. So that's a good idea. The reason I come back to this one is a tricky balance. Okay? You want people to feel heard. You want them to feel ownership, that they're part of the process. At the same time, teams need to make decisions, right? And you hear about groupthink. Groupthink is where a team does things that are essentially inferior to what any one of the team members by themselves would do, because they sort of go, okay, we got a bunch of ideas. We could make a boat. We could make a car. Half the team wants one, half the team wants the other. Let's make an amphibious car. And that was probably the stupidest thing you could have done, right? So you do have to make the hard decisions sometimes of we got to make a call here. This idea seems better than that. We're going to go with it, right? Maybe even this, we don't know which one's better. We're going to just pick this one randomly. Everybody's got to live with that. So there's this balance. You want people to be heard, feel respected, but that doesn't mean we take it, and I don't think you're suggesting, is take it to the level of, we took your idea last time, we'll take Bob's idea this time, Sue's idea next time. That's a little too equal. We got to still try to have merit in the ideas. But anyway, really good ideas. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, so if not, I'm going to put up my top ones. So, which actually are very close to what you just said. So open discussion. This is absolutely a trait of all high-performing teams. You tell it like it is. You don't let things fester, but you try to be constructive. Okay, so there are. The difficult conversations are when you think things aren't going that well. We're not making up enough progress on this, and I think your part has to come faster. So you need to choose your words carefully, trying not to make that person defensive, but in the end, you have to say that. You can't dance around it. Every year in this course, I will get a few emails, and Professor Chong will get a few emails late in the course that say, Bob hasn't been doing anything all term. I want Bob off my team, I want Bob's grades, and by the way, please don't tell Bob I said this, right? And that's the wrong way to do things. You should have been telling Bob all along. When it became clear there was a problem, you should have been talking about it, okay? And that takes a certain amount of courage, but you need to create that culture of open discussion. Accountability. So this is part of having a shared objective. So you do have to agree where you're going. But beyond that, you take ownership of your part of the project. So part of project management is making sure everybody knows what they're responsible for, and then that person should be very clear. I'm supposed to get this function done in milestone 1. It works, it doesn't work, I've started, I haven't started. There's no dissembling, there's no hiding if there are problems. You tell it like it is, the accountability is clear. Transparency, that goes with accountability. So things do go wrong on projects all the time. Sometimes people make mistakes, sometimes people get busy, they don't meet their commitments. Be transparent about that. It's much better to just say, yeah, I said I'd get this done, I didn't get it done for this reason, what's our recovery plan? Don't try to hide it. And trust is kind of an outcome of this. Okay, so all high-performance teams, in my experience at least, they have a high degree of trust, but they don't have a high degree of trust because they all come in and say, we need to have trust. Trust is built. It's built by working together, it's built by open discussion, by being accountable and transparent. These are the things that lead to a high trust, which just makes everything more efficient. And again, this isn't something that you just do in this course. It's going to be key in your career that you have these traits that enable you to be a productive team member and also eventually to build effective teams. And it's hard. So you gradually learn how to do this under different situations, and that's part of what makes you a more valuable engineer, employee, manager, owner over time. Okay, so another thing that teams should do is have a status meeting. So in this typical in industries, you have a weekly status meeting for teams. So we're modeling that in this course. You have 2 status meetings every week, one with your CI, one with your TA. Best practice for those status meetings are that you have some written notes. They don't have to be very formal, they don't have to be very long, but you should have them written down. It's better not to write them on a sheet of paper. You write them on some electronic form that everybody can see. So in this course, we're using a pretty common one called Wiki. It's not the only one, but Wiki is a fast-to-edit web page. That's what we're asking you to use. So yeah, good meetings make teams more effective. You want to show 2 of those traits, transparency and accountability. So how do you show that? You have a concise statement of what's done and what's not done, and that's your transparency. Your accountability comes from you have tasks assigned not to the team, but to individual people. So everybody knows what he or she is supposed to get done. And they have target completion dates. So again, that's breaking down tasks, is making people accountable for them. Leverage your CI and TA's experience. Talk to them, how does this plan look? We're having a problem here, Bob's never doing his tasks. Talk about that, get some advice. Okay, so let's talk about the wiki. So it's the team's memory and to-do list. You can put anything you want on this. So you can put key data, detailed plans, whatever you like. But what your TA and your CI really want to see are what are you going to do next with a target date and owner for every task, and what have you achieved? So what is done, and what had to be reassigned because it didn't meet the original date. Okay, so, and that's going to form part of your grade on all of your milestones for the project management part. So your TA doesn't just care about how well your software works, he or she cares about how well your team worked, how well you organized yourself. And a key part of that is what are you writing on this wiki? You can have lots of detailed data that you don't really want to show the TA, that's fine. You can just put it on a separate subpage for the team. You should already have an email that tells you your login information. Change your initial password. If you don't have this email, post on Piazza. And Wiki is a very easy to edit web page. There's a quick start guide on Quarkus that tells you how do you rapidly make status updates on a wiki. Okay, so here's a sample wiki that Professor Chong and I have made with one of the TAs, Sarah, showing how we're attacking milestone 1. Okay, so, and actually we made this a long time ago, 2016, but I'm not updating the date. What do you think of this wiki? You know, if you evaluate it against the rubric that I just showed you, is this good? You know, is our TA going to like our project management or not? So what do you think? Just buzz in and tell us it's fantastic, or here are things that we should improve. Okay, so A09, what do you think?
Like, they didn't specify who's doing what, and yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't have owners. Who's doing what? We basically just say there's a team status. The team is going to work on milestone 1, and we're going to finish it by January 28th and test it till February 1st, and we're half done. Also, we're working on WD0. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't give any particular task to any particular person. Also, you said who does what. So it's not very concrete either. It's just kind of, the tasks are too big. The tasks are complete milestone 1. And then the tasks are test milestone 1. So it's not very granular and hasn't assigned them to people. So it's not good, right? So who, what, okay? So it's not very precise on what tasks. It does have target completion dates, but basically there's not enough tasks. It's not broken down enough. Okay, here's our second try. Okay, so the previous wiki would get you a pretty bad project management mark. It's a little bit better than a blank page, but it's not great. Okay, so read through this one. Okay, different team. Okay, we got Bob, Rob, and Cobb, who all like to work together. So Bob is going to write the first 4 M1 functions, says what those are. Code complete is a term that means I've written the code, but it's not tested yet, which means it probably doesn't really work, but at least I've taken a crack at it. Bob's going to pass all the tests by January 26th, or all the functionality tests. Going to pass all the performance tests by January 29th. And those 4 functions might need some code and load map, so Bob's also responsible for that. Might need to do that to make them fast. Okay? And then the other 2 team members, relatively similar style of status. What do you think? So how do you, buzz in if you have a thought on this. Do you like it? Do you not like it? What's good? What's bad? So you're playing TA here. You're predicting what kind of grade am I going to get. And when we're not doing this just as an arbitrary exercise, it also is how well am I going to be able to run a team when I graduate. So what do you think? Any thoughts on this one? Somebody has to have a thought. Is it better than the last one? Okay, so it is better than the last one. Okay, so I'm going to A09 again. A09, I'm going to give you guys some chocolate bars afterwards. You're my go-to team.
Okay.
What do you think?
So it's a lot better. Like, it has like a date, and it has like, so each individual person, what they're going to finish, what they're working on.
Okay, so it has target dates. It has actual tasks, like smaller tasks, so it's more granular. It has owners. It meets most of the things we asked for, right? So yeah, this one would do okay. And yeah, because it has measurable milestones, it has target dates, it has owners. So it meets the key thing we want to break down this milestone into smaller pieces, assign owners, pick target dates. Don't make all the target dates the final due date. You're going to spread the deadline pressure out, give yourself a margin. Okay, this one now is largely kind of the same as what I showed you. It also has tasks, right? And it has a due date, and it has an owner. Okay, so by February 18th, I'm supposed to, this is milestone 2, but I'm supposed to be able to draw all the streets. And this one actually also has information on completion. So I'm behind. I didn't make any progress as of February 19th. Alan has basically got a whole bunch of features that he's supposed to complete for the next milestone, and he's actually done. And Sarah has specific tasks, and she's partway done. Okay, so this is better still, because it's basically visually more organized. It's very similar to the previous one, but it brings in the additional tracking of how is it going, what's done, what's behind. And just putting it in a table just makes it much more concise. So your TA is going to be a lot happier with this one. And then you can put any free-form text you want in here. So there's a risk here that I'm not getting stuff done, right? So maybe I need to, and the other team members are flagging this risk to me, right? That's open communication. We're worried, you're behind, are you okay? They're also flagging it to the TA. So the TA sees, okay, this team is making efforts to manage what might be a problem here, right? We've got 2 of the 3 people getting stuff done and 1 person's not. You don't want to hide that from your TA. You don't want to hide it from your teammates too. So this writing it down is part of having a conversation with me and making that conversation visible to the TA. This is also best practice in industry. So if there's a problem in a team, I expect the members of that team to talk about it, try to sort it out, and then if it's not getting fixed, I expect them to escalate it to me, right? If I'm the manager of that team or the director of that team. I don't expect them to escalate it to me before they've talked about it amongst themselves at all. But if they have done that and it's not getting better, they should make it visible. And that's what this does, okay? So yes, this is my recommendation of how you should organize your wiki. It's all pretty clear? Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, project management. So part of what I was just showing you is project management. Assign specific tasks to specific people with target due dates. There are 2 extreme versions of project management that people often talk about. So one is waterfall development. Waterfall development emphasizes a lot of upfront planning, and it's a somewhat sequential process. So you work out what are the requirements, what do users want from your program. You work out the design of it, so maybe the high-level architecture of the software. You implement it, you test, so you verify it, and then eventually you're going to go into maintenance where you're just fixing bugs. So the idea of waterfall is that if you can make changes here, where you're just talking to your end users, you're brainstorming in the team about what should this do, they're cheap. We're just changing a specification. We haven't built anything yet. If we get into design and we figure out we need to make some changes, it's still cheaper than if we're way down in the details of we've written most of the software and we have to go back and make some fundamental changes. So there's a logic to waterfall. Okay, the other kind of extreme in approaches is agile development, also sometimes called iterative development. Okay, so what does that do? So basically you have an idea, and so you have some requirements, right? You have an idea of how something might work, what problem it might solve, but you don't worry about getting really detailed requirements, and you think about how it's going to work pretty quickly, and then you build a prototype. So a prototype is your initial software. Doesn't do everything you want, maybe it wasn't the best choices, but you made it quick. You test it and evaluate how well it works. Ideally, you get it all the way out to end users. And then you see how that testing goes. Was it fast enough? Was it stable? Did it solve the right problems? Did people find it easy to use? And where did they find problems? What was hard to use? What wasn't fast enough? You make a priority list of, okay, these are the things we need to refine, and let's go work on those. And you iterate quickly. So you go around this loop many times. So you do some planning, but much less, and you iterate a lot more, which means you're going to rewrite software more. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I want you to talk about these 2. And how many, did you study both these models in APS 111, 112? Or did you study waterfall only? Or you didn't study either of them? How many, is this familiar to anyone out there, other than Professor Chong? Yes, so what do you think? Did you study both of these? I'm going to turn on your mic so I can hear you better. Yeah?
I think we only did Agile.
Okay, so you only saw Agile, so you didn't see Waterfall. Okay, that's actually good. It used to be the APS 111, 112 only taught Waterfall. So it sounds like maybe they've flipped a bit. Okay, so I want you to think about the strengths and weaknesses of these for not long, just maybe a couple minutes, and then we'll talk about them. guys think? Okay, so anybody want to buzz in and tell me what you think? Which of these do you like better? Do you like aspects of one versus the other? Because I should say also that I phrase these as two extremes. You know, many people blend aspects of both together. The world isn't just a binary choice. So what do you think? I'm going to call on D04 if nobody else is brave enough, because I know they have a good idea. Okay, D04, what do you think?
I personally prefer Agile because you can, as you iterate through, you'll start out with a plan, but then you'll end up with something completely different, and it'll be better by the end because of it.
Okay, so you prefer Agile, essentially because people are not that good at planning, right? You could make a plan. The logic of waterfall makes sense. Changes would be easier to make if you make them earlier in this linear design cycle, just when you're gathering requirements. But the thing is, people tend to be pretty bad at planning. So until 15, 20 years ago, waterfall techniques were dominant, including for software. They were dominant for everything. And over the last 15, 20 years, Agile techniques have become dominant, particularly in software, but it's spreading to other industries. And the basic reason is it's just realizing that people aren't that good at planning, but what people are good at is learning from their mistakes, right? Making something, iterating to make it better. So that totally makes sense. So the waterfall strength, it's very efficient if you can plan well. The Agile strength is you can iterate fast and refine things even if the initial plan wasn't that detailed. The big weakness of waterfall is planning paralysis. So before I joined Altera, so I'm not responsible for this one, Altera had a very successful CAD system, computer design system for their chips called Max+2. They decided that they should rewrite the whole thing. It's a dangerous thing to do in software because you have a multi-million line code base and you've decided you're going to change the whole thing. But this time they were going to do it in a better software architecture. They spent a year with their key engineers trying to plan how that software would work, and it was just too complicated. Even their best engineers could not plan out a project that complicated. After a year, they realized this is too late, it's not going to be ready in time for the next chip, and they basically started writing code. So this is an extreme example that cost literally hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, this is a really expensive mistake that actually, had a big impact on some people's careers, because that kind of mistake sticks to you for a while. And it was planning paralysis. They thought if we just think about this enough, we discuss it enough, we put our best people on it, we can make a really detailed plan and just execute. And once you hit a certain level of complexity, it doesn't work. So Agile is dominant in software. This is an interesting book on this. the cathedral and the bazaar. The cathedral is a very centrally planned waterfall method of building a beautiful cathedral. And the bazaar is a shop of, a marketplace of ideas that's very chaotic, where you're just buying and grabbing things. And basically this book argues that the bazaar tends to work better. And that's what made Linux work so well, is having many, many people making all sorts of iterative changes really fast. And that allowed Linux to evolve faster than Windows, which was more centrally planned. Okay, so Agile is now dominant in software. It's increasingly used in hardware design as well. You can apply it to chip design. Another example of this, who has heard of Nupedia? Okay, nobody? Don't expect you to. Who has heard of Wikipedia? Okay, I believe you all have. I'm pretty sure you've all gone there at some point. So Wikipedia, as you know, is an open source encyclopedia. Anybody can go in and edit it, and then other people can edit it if they got it wrong. This is like the epitome of Agile, right? The idea is that we can make changes quickly and we'll gradually converge to a good solution. The creators, the original creation of Wikipedia, the same people actually had a competing product that they thought was going to be the one that was going to work better, called Nupedia, where they basically were making an online encyclopedia where they invited experts in each topic to come write carefully curated articles on that topic, and they'd have a beautiful online encyclopedia that was much more trustworthy. And it was more like a traditional encyclopedia where people wrote it and then you published it. By the time Wikipedia had thousands of articles on various topics, Nupedia had 50. So it was just too slow. The central planning did not work very well. Wikipedia, it was actually surprising to the people who had set this up. Wikipedia was the winner, right? This kind of chaotic, agile environment. It's even spreading to industries that you would think, like the car industry is becoming more agile, and even rocket design. So SpaceX has greatly reduced the cost of launching satellites into space, and their key differentiator has been the willingness to fail. So at NASA, you launch a rocket, it blows up, the whole nation watches, and they say that's $1 billion of taxpayer money down the drain, who's to blame? And in SpaceX, they just take that as part of the cost of doing business because they're set up for rapid iteration. Obviously, they do some planning. So Agile doesn't mean you don't plan at all. Like, they don't randomly weld things together and then try to shoot them into space. They do as much planning as they reasonably can, but then they fire it up and see what happens. And they actually optimize their manufacturing not for essentially lowest unit cost if they never change anything. They optimize their manufacturing to be able to quickly tweak things so that they can actually build prototypes much faster and cheaper. And you've probably seen videos like this. Let's see if I can bring up this video. Okay, so this is a cut together video that you can watch offline if you want, or after this course, of basically just their Starship rocket blowing up. And there are lots of them, right? They blew it up many, many times. So there's a different way it blew up, and this is expensive, right? So each of these is a very high profile failure. But they learned from each one of them, and they now can land this giant rocket on its exhaust, basically, on the bottom of the rocket so they can reuse it, which is a giant breakthrough, right? So SpaceX pioneered reusable rockets. Nobody had done it before. They blew up tons of rockets before that happened. But by doing this, they can undercut their competitors by a factor of 10. And the key thing they did, though, was the willingness to fail and to make iterative improvements very quickly, which was against the grain of the rocket industry. Okay, so this is being done in rockets. We should definitely be doing it in software. Okay. Agile is also used for startups. So there's a very good book called The Lean Startup. The Lean Startup basically says that startups should apply agile development principles to the entire business, not just software development. So here's a classic, business school, at least business school as of about 15 years ago, way to make a new company. So you make a business plan, you discuss it a lot, you show it to your investors, you design and implement your basic product, you refine it, you deploy it, right? So you figure out how to get it into stores or out to the customers, and then finally the customers see it and you see whether it's selling or not. And it's basically, this is the waterfall method, right? Classic business development prospects are waterfall. And the lean startup says, don't do that, do agile. So agile means you still make an initial plan. It's not like you have no plan. You say, I have a company and I have no idea what it does. No, you need an idea, you need some plan, but make it quickly. And then you design and implement a minimum viable product. So like the easiest way you could get this, fastest way you could get this product going imaginable. So for example, there was a company that was planning to sell, their business idea was to sell information on the soil conditions and the moisture level across farms so that they could help farmers optimize their yield. And they would use drones and they'd use AI and all sorts of stuff to produce this data, and then they could sell it to the farmers and get an increased yield, and farmers would share some of that revenue with them. They did not go off and design all the drones, all the AI software, et cetera. What they did to start with is they have a web page that says, we're going to do all this for you, but then they really send a person out to do it by hand. Okay, a person walks around the field, measures things by hand, produces a customized report to you. And what they got from that is they see, what will people pay? Will they pay for this? What will they pay? How many of them are there? And once they confirm they will pay and they see what they need, now they start building it out. What are the drones? What are the software to really do it at scale? And so sometimes your minimum viable product is, it's beyond hacky. It's being done even by hand, just to see, is it something people will buy? Okay, so you deploy that to customers and you see what happens. Maybe you have to refine the product, maybe you have to refine the business plan. You actually find out they don't want to buy this, they want to buy something else. So you build that thing instead. Okay, so again, we're going to use Agile in this course. It doesn't mean do no planning though. You saw that we do want you to have a wiki that has a course plan, because Agile doesn't mean I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. It just means make a plan quickly, you accept it will be imperfect, and then you start iterating. Okay, here's another thing I want you to bear in mind as you're managing projects and teams. So you can read this offline. This Jeff Bezos is the CEO of Amazon, and in his 2016 letter to shareholders, he said the company philosophy is something he called disagree and commit. So what does he mean by that? He means he wants people to openly express their opinions. He doesn't want them just to agree in advance or see which way the wind is blowing and not say anything. After everybody has given their opinion, they're going to make a decision quickly, and everybody's going to try to make it work. So even if you're not your idea wasn't picked, it's done, you're making this work. And you're going to make it work unless it becomes clear it was clearly wrong. If it's clearly wrong, you will change the decision, you will commit to the other thing, and you will do it. So why does he say this? Why is this so important? Because trying to achieve consensus on everything is too slow. You wind up with another form of decision paralysis.